are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, how are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty good, guys. How are you?
We are doing well, just spending a little bit of time in the Super 6 that you guys put out this morning. We'll get to some Nebraska basketball too, but I wanted to start here because we were just talking about it in the previous segment. I know you had Dylan Raiola at 1. There were a couple guys that didn't. Can you come up with an explanation for me? And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this. For the guys that didn't put Dylan Raiola at 1, can you kind of understand a line of thinking that would get them there?
They need to answer from you under intense questioning, I would say. No, I'm messing with them. I do have a little bit of an echo in my phone. I just wanted to let you guys know I'm having a little trouble.
Okay, no worries, BC. We appreciate you working through that with us here. In the final, Jamal Banks was not included in the did not make the cut on the voting for the Super 6. Were you surprised at all that a guy that I think people have pretty high expectations from did not make the cut there?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. In his case and some of the transfers, I wonder if some people left them off because they're only going to be in the program a year or two. Sometimes guys like to do it the more traditional way where you pick someone who has about 4 seasons. So that might have been the reason on that one. But Micah Mazuka did get in there, I saw. And as we heard from Matt Rule the other day, he's got some work to do. So we'll see if some people maybe wish they had a different vote than they had.
Now, BC, my favorite on this list is always the sleeper because, you can look at the Super 6 and just think, okay, a majority of people are probably saying the same thing. But when you get to the sleeper, it's just like, okay, that's the long shot. Everybody just kind of just throws something at the wall and hopes it sticks. You landed on Donovan Jones. Why?
I think he falls into the sleeper category for sure because he hasn't been talked about as much, as some of the other guys. And I love what he did his senior season at Omaha North. I mean, he was just a playmaker. He had to play in a state title game where he makes an incredible catch, like in overtime, to help his team win. I know this coaching staff fell in love with him when he showed up to the summer camp, and he wowed them. And I thought he just put it up on film his last year and can be a versatile guy in the defense. So what's interesting about the sleeper is everybody's got like a different sort of interpretation of what that represents. And somebody's sleeper is sometimes somebody's like 3rd or 4th guy on the list. So that's always kind of fun. But Donovan Jones, to me, is like a true sleeper. I don't think he gets as much love in the class as some others. I was joking for anybody who didn't pick Dylan Raiola, by the way. I understand that opinions are making it go around. I don't know if we've ever had a unanimous pick at number 1, so that would have been a first, I think. But everybody on there has got something to prove, whether you're Dylan Raiola, who's the most highly touted guy, or to your question, one of the sleepers like a Donovan Jones, or a Braylon Prude or somebody like that. You all got to do it at a different level now than high school, and whatever you're rated before, it doesn't matter. So that's one of the beauties of it.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson of Husker 24/7. BC, one of the more interesting names that you included on your list was Willis Mahe. I am intrigued by him a lot, but give me a little bit of your thinking of why you included him.
I wanted to bring in one of the Miami guys, and he was sort of my favorite throughout the cycle, just in talking to him and the confidence he has. I think he's a determined guy in the sense that whenever I would interview him, he would always get asked by other people about his dad and all that, and he loves his family. But I understand this. Guys like him have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because every story that gets written about him, it feels like during the recruiting process, is always like son of a NFL star, hurricane legend, stuff like that. It's like attached to every article or within the first 5 or 6 sentences of every story about them. And I was talking to him about that in December, and he's just like, I just want to carve my own path. It's not, he's thankful for the way his family has been behind him and all that, but he wants to make his own way on the football field. He's excited to do it on a different side of the ball than his father did, playing linebacker. I think there's an opening for one of the young backers to maybe force their way into the 2 deep, whether it be him or like Vincent Shavers is already gaining weight and I think enjoying himself here. So I thought it was kind of between him and Shavers. I like both of them, and I ended up just going with Mahe because I sort of had a better feel for a longer time about him than Shavers, who I just sort of got to know at the end of the recruiting process. So that was my reasoning. When you get to 5 or 6, it's always tough for me because there's like 3 or 4 or people I could put in there. Like I didn't have Caleb on mine, Caleb Benning, and I think Caleb's like a surefire, like going to contribute guy in this program. So, no, and I'm not covering my tracks because of Damon. I actually think that, but my point is, I always get when I get to like 5 through 9 on that list. If anybody does the exercise, I think there's always somebody like, oh man, I wish I could have him there, But you got to cut it off somewhere, I guess.
Well, BC, we heard from Coach Rule yesterday, and he mentioned something about the quarterbacks and maximizing reps at all positions, and that's kind of been his thing since his arrival. The ones that probably need the most reps are those quarterbacks. However, we all know the guy would a job, and if it's not him, then this state may burn down. In terms of maximizing those reps, though, what are you hoping to see from Ray? You can firstly eyes on him in the spring.
I've always said, it's hard in the spring for fans and media to get their fill or get exactly what they need to be satisfied or think like things are just going to turn the corner. But, the time we do get to see this team, the spring game, I've always cautioned people, like, don't overread into it. Be careful with it. And yet at the same time, I would say right now, when they get to that spring game in April, you want to see a cleaner version of the offense than you saw a season ago, while understanding it's kind of vanilla still. They're working through things. But if you remember, last year's spring game actually was sort of a setup of things to come. And at the time, you could kind of wave your hand at it and say, well, it's April, it's fine, they'll get it figured out. But turnovers and just like unforced errors were a big part of it. And in previous scrimmages last spring, you heard the same thing. Like Rule would come in and really like the intensity of guys, but they were having turnover issues and fumbling snaps and stuff like that. And it ends up, translating to September right away, and they never really got over it. So I would just want to see, like, when we get our opportunities to put eyes on it, hopefully a little bit cleaner operation where they have some stuff they feel comfortable about. The unforced errors are a little bit less. And if there are turnovers, which there will be, it's, half the time it's more of a great play by the defense than just here you go. So that's one of the biggest things is you want to kind of hear like a cleaner spring, not just in the spring game, but when Rule talks to the media about scrimmages and things like that.
BC, it's kind of funny because I agree with you that you can't put too much stock in the spring game. You don't want to read too much into it and all that. But you're also right in that the spring game offense played out almost exactly how the regular season offense did last year. So it's kind of hard to talk out of both sides of my mouth with that. But I wanted to touch on something else that Rule said yesterday. He's talking about, he got asked about the walk-on class, and he talked a lot about how, he was a walk-on, and a lot of the coaching staff is former walk-ons, and how he thinks there's maybe 3 or 4 walk-ons in this class that will end up being starters one day. Obviously, there's a couple guys that had scholarship offers of other places that chose to walk on at Nebraska. But when he says something like that, are there some names that pop to the front of your mind in terms of guys you think might fit that mold?
They've got some really interesting guys, like that are technically not walk-ons that, are or they technically are walk-ons, but basically would be scholarship guys anywhere else, like you mentioned. And, Kamir Prescott is actually not like a scholarship guy at the moment. And that's a steal, like in the class. And like, we're in a weird time. I guess where I would take this question is, we used to be really fired up about like the 85-man roster, and I know people still kind of pay attention to it. And Rule was joking about how, like, he gets stopped on the streets, like, how are you going to fit the numbers, and stuff like that. To me, it's diminished in its value to us on the outside of like what the difference is between a guy who has a scholarship and a guy who's on NIL money and a guy who isn't, maybe just a walk-on guy. But, Riker Evans is an interesting athlete. Like, if you're talking about just like pure walk-ons, he's like guys like that who just like put up a lot of numbers at lower levels are always intriguing. Like Rowdy Bauer, an athlete at Norfolk. Those guys sometimes just pop up out of nowhere, and suddenly in like their second or third year, they're making plays. But then there's like Jordan Ochoa, like the edge defender from, out of Colorado. And he'd be a scholarship guy at a lot of places. And I would classify him in that walk-on category at the moment. But I like the fact that it's hard to tell now. I like that the lines are blurred between who's what a little bit, because that's sort of the way it should be. That's the way Nebraska has always thrived, honestly, even though we did have the 85 in front of us. It was always kind of cool when, you saw players come up who's like, yeah, that guy, I forget he's even a walk-on, like John Bullock, like, oh yeah, he was a walk-on, guys like that. I think they have shown that there is a path to playing under the staff. And the staff doesn't really give two figs about how you came in and what your label was. It's just like, what can you do when you get on the field and run with your opportunity?
BC, Nebraska has the 18th ranked recruiting class in the country. And I got asked this last night. Think that actually means something, or is it just a number?
Oh, it's just a number for now. I mean, it always feels good to have a top 20 class. We've seen it before. We've seen other coaches get top 20, top 25 classes, and now you got to develop and you got to win some more games. And I've always said, what would that recruiting class be like? Not that the staff cares about their rankings. I don't think they do that much, but like, let's say Nebraska won 9 games. Like, where could they maybe get this class in, could they be like more in that top 15 category with some guys? You kind of wonder that. But I've always said, going back to the Pelini era, if they're in the top 25, they've given themselves, I think, usually enough material, and they've had it to have a shot to win their share of games. It's just a matter of, can that guy get better from his first to second year? And then by his fourth year, you think like, yeah, he's really, every year I've seen that guy get better. And I think for too long, Nebraska was stagnant there. Like, there'd be good 3-4 star recruits, and you might see some flashes early, and then it felt like it kind of just evened out for them. And this is where you want to see, like, I thought it was encouraging, like last year, like Bryce Benhart, who was a big time recruit when he came out long ago, and it felt like he'd been kind of on the same plane for a while. And then last year was really good. I thought it was a big step for him under this staff with conditioning and nutrition and just his play on the field. So you're hoping that that's a sign, like guys like him developed, and now you're going to see it in younger players. And we'll be able to tell in the trenches within a year or two, because there's some really promising players you would have high hopes for on the O-line and D-line. It's just a matter of what do those guys look like in a couple of years? We don't have to see them all right away now, but you want to hear a little bit about them, and then in a couple of years see that they're contributing in some way.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. All right, BC, we're going to change gears here on you to go to Nebraska basketball. We've talked a lot about the season in general, what's left on the schedule. Obviously, there are road woes and all of that this morning. We haven't gotten a ton into the game itself, so that's where I want to start with you. Obviously, things got off the rails pretty early against Northwestern, and they were never really able to get things back on track. In your mind, as you're watching that, what went wrong for Nebraska that they weren't able to correct?
I didn't have any trust that they could get a defensive stop, really. And even when they did force a miss, if you look at the offensive boards, they were stacking up even by the first or second media timeout. Like Northwestern had like 4 or 5 already on the offensive glass by the 8-minute mark. Ended up 13-3 in offensive rebounds favoring Northwestern. Then you compile that with Nebraska having 17 turnovers. And I think at one point it was like 22-0 points off turnovers. It ended up, I think, 26-7, but it was just a landslide there. So Hoiberg always talks about the big two, turnovers, rebounding, win one, and you at least got a chance. Nebraska didn't win either. And so you got the result you did. And I just felt like defensively and on the glass, for whatever reason, this crew just struggles. Illinois obviously was a down the wire game you wish you had in your pocket now, but in most every other one, it feels like it's been pulling teeth to try to get some rebounds, and it was just a sloppy game too by Nebraska. Like the 17 turnovers, some of them were just careless, lazy passes that get intercepted for dunks, and trying to one-hand catch stuff and without authority, and they take it away. And then Boo Buie got his revenge, and I was a little worried about that for Nebraska because they had shut him down the first game, and he's too good of a player usually to get twice. And he was ready for Nebraska, and he let them know about it too a little bit.
BC, 4 out of the next 7 are at home. Thank goodness. But let's scenario build. Yeah. Fill in the blanks. The Huskers go dancing if, and the Huskers won't go dancing if.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think they go dancing if they win. I feel good if they win 6 more games. And I'm not saying 6 of 7. I'm saying 5 of 7 and 1 in Minneapolis at the tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 5 of 7, I'm feeling okay about things. Like they got a good shot. I mean, it's going to be interesting though. It's a good question because like there's wins that you hope hold up well. Purdue is going to, and I was feeling pretty good about Wisconsin holding up, but they're on a skid now. And if they kind of just keep going that way, you worry about what quad certain wins fall under and all that stuff. But hopefully they get their act together. Kansas State getting their act together would help things, which obviously beating Kansas was good the other night, but they had been on a losing streak. So I think 5 of 7 though for Nebraska, and they just got to worry about themselves. And really they gotta lock up the vault. And I think they gotta put away the narrative that they can't win one game on the road. There's a lot of teams in the country that struggle to win away from home, and they only win a couple maybe in their conference. But right now, what's attached to Nebraska is that offer. And if Nebraska had even one of those games, that they've, Rutgers, Minnesota, Illinois, take your pick, it'd be a different conversation, I feel like, even this morning. It's all is not lost. I told people before this 4-game stretch that just finished, like, this is dangerous, and I was worried they might be 5-8. They're 6-7 in the league, but you got to go home, and you can't expect anything's a given. You can't just say, oh, Michigan's had a tough go of it this year. Those are 2 wins. Like we saw last night, Michigan, as bad as it's been for them, they've got material on their roster. On a given night, they can beat somebody like they beat Wisconsin. So Nebraska's got to come to ball out Saturday And then they get a bye sort of until they play for a week, and you get a chance to get your legs under you, and then you got to roll. But they got to like really have a determined like couple of days and understand, and then almost treat it like season's on the line, guys. Like you got to go get this one, not get a scab against Michigan heading into this break. And if you're 7-7 in the league, then people feel a little bit better. And then, got to beat Penn State, Minnesota, and Rutgers at home. The road games are Ohio State and Indiana. So you got Michigan. Those are 3 games where maybe you can win 2 of those 3. It sets up that way, but you just can't look at it like this is going to be easy. You got to go into every game like it's like it is Wisconsin or Purdue on the other side against you.
BC, I'm curious, are you more encouraged or discouraged by the fact that a lot of what went wrong in the loss to Northwestern last night was not necessarily like shot making, stuff like that, but maybe more focus and effort things? They looked pretty sluggish. You mentioned the kind of sloppiness on passes. I mean, Northwestern jumped a ton of passing lanes last night, and pretty easily so. Those are fixable things theoretically, but is that a concern for you that some of those things have started to fall apart?
A little bit. I'll be honest. I'm not making excuses for him. I wasn't that surprised last night. I didn't like it going in, like how this set up. Like you had a team in Northwestern where it felt like their backs were to the wall a little bit and had to win at home. You had a determined like top point guard in the league who was like ready to show out after, Nebraska got him the first game. And then you had Nebraska coming off a short prep, where they almost had it against Illinois in a very emotional game. A lot of stuff lined up that the performance didn't surprise me. I don't think it's lack of effort ever with these guys. I know sometimes it can appear that way in sports, like when you're just sloppy and you're not quite, as speedy as you need to be with how you pass the ball and how you handle it on offense. I just think like sometimes they pay a price, and it seems to happen, especially on the road. And we've talked about it, for not having maybe that true point guard. And it goes back to, they thought they had that true point guard, like in Aaron Ulis,
Mm-hmm.
when they got him, and he's not available right now. He's still on this team, but not available this year. And, without him and like sort of that steady, like he's a natural at this position guy, I just think there's a price to be paid for it sometimes on the road. And it feels like and teams know that they want to pressure Nebraska heavy and make sure how can you really handle the ball? Like, how are your handles, Bryce Williams or whomever? Like, let's put the heat on you and see. And occasionally it led to some disruptive things. And last night it was just too constant with it. So it was a very disappointing game. And yet this morning they have to be like moved on completely. Like even right now, I think their mind has to be like, all right, there's 7 games left of this regular season. We're supposed to be the favorite in most of these games. Let's go prove that's a true thing.
Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. We appreciate your time. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.